Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Create webinar. And in a moment, I'm going to introduce Peter to you, who's going to take us on a wonderful journey into core skills and how core skills work in curriculum, and particularly the curriculum he's been working on with his team. But first, Robin, would you be able to acknowledge country for us?
With pleasure, Michael. I want to acknowledge and pay respect to our First Nations Australians, our oldest living culture, our first storytellers. I want to acknowledge that our First Nations Australians embed the story and the arts in their doing, knowing, being, and becoming. And we have so much to learn about curriculum from them. I'm joining from Darug country tonight. The University of Sydney is on Gadigal land, but I would like to invite you to put in the chat where you're joining from. I also want to acknowledge that this land was never ceded, always was, always will be Aboriginal land. Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, Robin. So I should probably introduce myself properly. My name's Michael Anderson, and with Robin, we co-direct the Create Centre. The Create Centre is a centre that is all about the application of arts and creativity in the lives of people. So whether it be in education or health, well-being, business, all of those places, the arts play a crucial role, and the Create Centre's mission is to support that with research, advocacy, and professional learning. Tonight, we're really doing something which sits at the centre of one of my interest areas, which is how we start thinking about some of the things that the arts engenders, supports, and grows, which is the core skills. And we were discussing earlier with Peter, sometimes called the soft skills. I like to think of them as the core skills because there's nothing particularly soft about them. They are the things that actually help us live, learn, and grow. Things like creativity, collaboration, communication, and critical reflection that I've written a bit about over the years. But as we turn to tonight, Peter's work has really looked at how the core skills are applied in the lives of our young people. He is CEO of Curriculum for Life, and that work sees him working on curriculum that really works on life skills for young people. And without much further discussion from me, I'd like to call on Peter to take us through it tonight. Thanks very much, Peter, for joining us.
You're welcome. Welcome, everybody. I understand you're called patrons. I'm assuming most of you are from Australia, but maybe not. Okay, so yeah, I'm really happy to be here. Here's my sort of prompts for how it would be great to work together. I spoke to Anna earlier about the level of interactivity, but here I'm really welcoming and inviting interactivity and questions and challenges around what we're doing. We're innovative and things have shifted radically recently with AI. So that means we've got a new model that needs testing against the ground truth of your own lived experience in schools, colleges, and other settings. Michael's just described the Create Centre stretches into other settings outside schools. When I put in this first slide, zoom out and zoom in, I have that kind of mind that works on a global level in terms of what we're addressing here collectively, and that's young people who are underserved, and right into the detail of how we can fix a market problem in delivery of life skills education. There's other elements about pedagogy and andragogy that we'll come on to, and the methodology that we've created and the frameworks and so forth that go into some detail. So I'm inviting you to have that stand back, see the very big picture, and then zoom in as an exercise. There's a little bit of reading, but not a lot. I just had a tech alert. The reason I blanked my screen is I lost my slides. So I am not the best on tech, so I'm just warning you, if I get into trouble, I'll just say I'm in trouble and I'll sort it out and come back. I think that's it. Radical candor, bottom left there, is just. I hope the Aussies have the sort of Dutch approach to feedback and commentary. Just say it how it is. If you have questions, really direct questions are really welcomed. Again, don't be inverted commas English about it. And then I'd love you to frame this webinar and your attendance by really thinking of young people you know and love, whether they be young people in classrooms you're involved with, in your life, your private life, your family, but just think about where they're at the moment in their lives and in their need for personal development and being equipped, ready for the world they're moving into, through and moving into. The other recent addition on this slide is name-checking Brian Bantilan, and he's at the De La Salle University in the Philippines. And I'm going to share this webinar with them. They've got a very big conference on bridging the gap between values education and religious education in the Philippines. And they have an interest in AI and how it's impacting on the what they call Generation Beta. So they're going to be potentially watching this. I'll press on if there are no questions, but questions can come literally by a hand in the air. I won't actually, probably a noise is best if you could. If anybody sees anybody else asking a question, please make a noise and I will pause. Okay, a little bit of bio about who you're meeting here in me. I was educated both private and state, so public school education, state education in the UK. I set up, it didn't really work for me. I was entrepreneurial. I wanted to get out and do things. So I have a small business background. And from that, I started getting into coaching, entrepreneurialism, and then performance of teams in businesses, mainly corporate. So I did 15 years of behavioral coaching, which led me to this interest in education. And I've been a governor all the way through for my own kids' schools and other schools in private, mainstream and alternative education. Looking at what your work yesterday on the website, it just reminded me of the value of my kids got from Steiner education, where they spent time. I got into that by mistake by marrying a German, and then learned how that rhythmic involvement of kids in cultural settings, in art and in play was really beneficial to my kids. So I've been involved in the Personal, Social, Health and Economic Association in the UK, PSHE education delivered in the UK, which is really challenged in terms of its reputation and how it can be introduced to young people and how it works for them. So I've spent 8 years observing, I'm just coming to the end of my trusteeship, the challenges of life skills education in our system. I'm also an activist, which is why we're part of this disruptive, inverted commas, charity. We're a UK-based charity. So I was coaching a bunch of people who run an international school group 12 years ago, and they said, why don't we get this into education? Why is it you're helping adults learn these skills? It was around leadership and team development. And the idea was seeded then. And then 5 years ago, that group was sold, and money from the sale of that group was invested into building what we've created thus far. What we've done is work a very collaborative model involving educators, young activists, because youth are at the center of our work. We're very intergenerational in what we do, curriculum designers and school leaders. We're still a startup because the world is changing. I think Steve Jobs said of Apple that it was the biggest startup in the world, always with a startup mentality. We're a startup because we're still tiny, but we've got faith that this concept and our model will slot in somewhere, and things are going better recently than they have been in terms of that, for reasons based on AI, but also how a dawning of reality on the market gives us confidence. So we've got potential revenue models for this, and we're speaking to private sector in the form of school groups that are international. We're still in touch with funders, especially now because we had an estimated cost of delivery of a full curriculum of about £1 million, and it's come down dramatically based on changes in how we can do this. We will be adopted potentially by another charity at some point, or another not-for-profit or even a profit. and we're based fundamentally on collaborative partnerships. And I noticed that that's a big word I read a few collaborative words in the Create Centre's website yesterday. So we think the future is this network of networks and connectivity of aligned people with shared values and intentions. So where are we coming from? This is the big picture, the why. We see all of the stuff that you see. We all see in terms of the permacrises, the rate of change, and the shocking role modeling going on in leadership in the world at the moment. And that's not just international leadership, is lacking the role modeling that young people require when they speak about think about and work towards going into the world. So we see the post-truth element, permeating how young people work in the world. But we do see an evolving network of networks, more ground-up organizations coming around to be part of an evolution/revolution in education. So we're encouraged by that. So we think mostly education is being outpaced, and that it's letting down millions of young people. In terms of the mission on the global elements of what I've just described on the left hand of this slide, we see ourselves as part of the strengthening of the social fabric and a socially just system. We see intergenerational and international cooperation being critical and beneficial. And we support I've got a spello there, sorry about that. Support the equipping of young people with future fit awareness, attitudes, skills and behaviors. So when we talk about life skills, we think central to that is awareness. How do you build awareness of what's going on and who you are? And then how do you operate in the world through attitudes, skills and behaviors? So on the educational side, we want to be part of innovation, empowering both learners and practitioners, and a positive disruption to the systemic challenges we've got. A story I would like to share is when the Finns, I don't know what you guys think of the Finnish model of education. It has a great reputation. I haven't got any evidence to back up whether that can be questioned. But when they went about reforming their education, they set their goal as saying, we would love anybody in any setting where they had a challenge, be it business or any collective, any group, we need a Finn in the room. In other words, they wanted to equip their young people with all of the skills, the qualities and the capabilities to say, we need a Finn to get this job done. And I think that that is where we want that equipment provided to all young people to have the option to develop themselves. And introvert, extrovert, whoever you are, bring something that people value because you are educated in life skills. And on a practical level, we want to remove or navigate the barriers that stop this type of education getting to young people, like you will be in terms of creativity in education. Why this, to make it available to all, we need to have a canny approach to the market. With our curriculum, we see it as an opportunity to get a candle in the room, which is just if you can get people started, a teacher or a young person or a group, a teacher especially, to try stuff in the room as a beginning, that may not fill the whole room with light, but it will start to, and from there it can build. So getting that transition into trial of a different type of work or an augmenting form of educational work. So it's no news to you, I guess, that the kids are facing a radically challenged future. But I wondered, there's a first opportunity here whether anybody would share a recent experience of where they found a young person, being super challenged by their environment. It's a sort of rhetorical question. I'll move on, but hold the thought and just see if you can place that alongside the kids you may be picturing as we go through this webinar. So I'm going to start with I warned you there's a little bit of reading to do. I'm going to summarize this slide, but essentially, if this nut's to be cracked and we can democratize access to life skills learning within a social socially just context, then we need to deal with some market forces that I believe don't belong in this area. And that is that there are a lot of people doing specialized work in a part of the curriculum that we offer. And then basically with the fragmentation of the market, you get a lot of providers approaching schools with solutions. And the bursar, the head, the teachers are going, where do I go? Who do I draw upon? Do I need to retrain? It will cost money. It doesn't work in our form of education, our curriculum. It doesn't conform to this, that, or the other. So you've got this marketplace where it's very difficult as a decision maker in education to address life skills learning coherently, is what I'm proposing. It means that accessibility is limited. It's not universal. The lack of coherence, the cost of bringing it into your classroom, the training costs, the time costs, and so forth, the complications make it difficult to introduce. And often the feedback on these programs are that they lack relevance to the young person and their learning requirements. They may not be fun, they may be too this or to that. So what we've done is create a coherent curriculum. Some of you may have checked it out by looking at our website. I'm going to introduce elements of it as we go through. And where we are empowering collaborative partners to be part of building a life skills curriculum so that it can be woven in to a coherent curriculum that is centralized and accessible. And we are, in terms of addressing fragmentation and accessibility, you are able to create life skills learning lessons that you might take from one region, one part of the world, and say, adapt it for our own needs. And then it is provided as a coherent, international, intergenerationally created curriculum, accessible for free, with 3-4 clicks to get hold of a learning exercise. And by doing it in a collaborative way, especially now that the AI support can make it available for groups like yourselves to create lessons and put them onto the site and co-create them and test them with young people, we can ensure that localization, culturalization can take place. So they are relevant to the learners in their context and adaptable, updatable, so that it's not delivered and going out of date, it can stay in date. The lesson, I'm talking about the lesson. So if we move through to picturing young people, what we've got, and I'll bring it to your attention later, is a codification of life skills. We've got 52, I think it is. And if you think about life skills and mapping them onto learning exercises, then you have topics: teens, leadership, systems thinking, creative thinking. Those are topics, and they map onto life skills. And underneath, if you think about human qualities, I would say here's just 4 examples of really valuable human qualities that one might observe in a good curriculum, a good suite of lessons. Young people need to be aware to become critical thinkers, awareness of self, group dynamics, social, emotional literacy. It's great if they can become values informed and know who they are, self-knowledge to understanding their own values. And if you think about something like your mission and creativity, of course, that spreads across every element of what young people do. Use their imagination in the right way, be creative. It infuses all of their life. So there are some really fundamental qualities. And then the trick is to place them in relevance to lessons, topics, and map them onto life skills, which is what we've done. So we've done a kind of taxonomy stroke mapping exercise in the development of this curriculum model. So this is a summary of what. I've said this is a why, what, who, how, so forth. This is a summary of the what. And it's tested by whether they enjoy the lessons, they take away good learning, and they operate in their context, in their communities, with confidence. Of course, we all want the same for young people. That's not going to be news. And I must say, a part of the frustration with us seeking funding, when you hear about the billions being channeled into all sorts of stuff, is that the people who have always called for better equipped young people transitioning both into university and out of university into working life, is that we haven't been able to attract corporate or foundational support for what is quite an innovative and disruptive concept yet. We're still working, but all of the evidence is there. And we've got all of this kind of stuff on our website. So I'm just clicking through, that life skills learning improves education outcomes, life chances and so forth. It's leveling. All the benefits are really easy to access, and there's good research and evidence for how life skills learning, if done well, makes a massive difference to young people. So the what have we done? We've built something that is accessible. We've codified the life skills. I'm going to show you those in a minute. We've made it coherent so that someone coming to a lesson can go, it makes sense. It's part of an all through curriculum. I've got my topics, my core curriculum. I understand what it offers and I can dip in and out, but also make a series of lessons that make sense over a month or a year. This can be delivered in-house. You're not flying in specialists like the elite institutions tend to pay outsiders to come in to deliver life skills training. Maybe a one-off once a term, a few 3 days exercise, or if it's delivered one of the specialist offerings, then they're paying a lot of money to get people to deliver it. That's in the private sector. Okay for them, not for everybody else. So these, as I said, can be made culturally relevant and localized, updatable, and when operated well, this curriculum, it's not ready to be this yet, but it will offer that all through spiral learning. And again, forgive me, I'm not a pedagogue, I'm an adult learner educator. So I don't have the depth of knowledge on pedagogy that you guys do. But that spiral effect for me is about, building over time. And in any given learning journey for a child in a school, you've got 12, 13 years, and the whole period offers great opportunity. So if we look at our curriculum, our core curriculum, it's underpinned by the thematic framework we've got, which is I, we, place, planet, think, feel, do. And the core curriculum is simply a reflection of that. So when you get to look at it, and we dip into it a bit later in this webinar, you're going to see those core subjects containing the lessons that we've built during our proof of concept phase. Let's have a quick look at it now. There it is. So we've got an opportunity to go into the website, click on something. The flashing ones are the ones where we've populated during our minimum viable product or our proof of concept phase, and in you go to get lessons. So the accessibility is not only about making it available in the Creative Commons, it's also making it available and easy to access and coherent. I'm just going to let you ponder those topic areas, the core curriculum subjects. I, we, place, planet. And there's a thematic framework I mentioned a moment ago. So if you take one of the young people you may have been thinking about based on my invitation earlier, just see them migrating from top left down to bottom right of this thematic framework, where literally it's about literacy at the beginning of social emotional, the words associated to equip them with social emotional awareness, and working through to essentially bottom right being advocates, because they've done years of having access to good lessons where think, feel, do and I, we, place, planet generate socially aware citizens. And you can see where they would start by working in small groups, individually in small groups, and then working in their community as their age grows, and then more socially engaged on a grander scale as they live responsibly on Earth. I was touched by Robin's introduction of country, and of course this will be done in schools, I'm assuming, in Australia, and will be a great touch point for young people to have understanding of others. So those kind of topics and themes possibly are already alive and kicking well in Australian education, but that is a great example of where lessons around that can be built in the all through curriculum, where they actually engage in, well, why are we respecting these people? What have they done? Of course, that may sit in history already in Australia, but weaving that kind of respect, reverence, and relating it to values and social situations is a great example of where lessons could be developed that sit with kids through their educational journey. So I mentioned that we've codified life skills. We did that by collaborating with the Life Skills Collaborative in India, who generated this codification and these life skills with Easel Labs at Harvard. And it was a bit of a coup, if I'm honest, for a tiny charity like us to be able to publish what they produced. And I'm going to ask you, because there's an exercise for you to involve yourself with in a moment, I'm going to ask you just to, with me, just, you can see that, you know, these are essentially a list of skills. They're not they're not everything, but they do cover most, and they can. We've got permission to evolve these skills and change and build upon them. But it's an opportunity to say, name a skill, codify it, name it for a young person and a teacher, and say what it is and what it looks like in action. And when we went to them and said, well, hang on a minute, where are the learning resources? They said, well, we don't do learning resources. What we've done is provide a framework. So our job, ambitious as it is to provide learning resources that create the opportunity to put this stuff into action. So lessons would create those outcomes. And if you could just think of the young person I asked you to imagine, or the young people, and just consider, because we're going to go now into the technical lesson creation work, how do we create lessons, and do an exercise. I'm going to ask you to think of a group of young people or a young person, and think to one of these particular tiles or not, a topic or a life skill, could be futures literacy, or it could be a life skill, and think of what you would love that person to learn. You would really love that group of people or that young person to learn, and just hold that thought. For example, I think your work in Create will stimulate curiosity. Obviously, this is called creative thinking. You will have a much more sophisticated vocabulary for that. So I'm going to give you a little time just to ponder that. Another favorite of mine is learning to learn. Do we actually educate kids about how they can learn to become curious? Because I think that's the source of a lot of capability that currently kids, I don't think, pick up learning theories and how they can learn better, how they can learn life skills and study academically at the same time. So learning to learn is very interesting. Conflict resolution, there we go. So there's a few there. If you pick just one example or a couple, that would be great. I'm going to click out of that. So imagine that skill, picture the best available expertise to inform the lessons. So once you've thought of that skill, where are the subject matter experts? Where are the beautiful people who've spent 20 years dedicating their life to, for example, respecting Aborigine culture. Where are they? Where are the most exciting forms of learning about it? And then picture the scale of relevant comparable resources, similar learnings in New Zealand, in South America, culturally relevant, that augment or supplement or add to or build your opportunity to educate around this topic. And this could come anywhere from books, films, papers, lectures, whatever. Nowadays, this is all accessible within milliseconds, as you're probably aware, and that's a hint at where AI is helping us. And then picture the opportunity to create a lesson, a game, a provocation, or a learning bite. And if that's available to you, would you be interested in doing it? That's again a rhetorical question, but we'll take that into the potentiality of yes, you can do this. The reason we can do this is get those people together, curate, especially now with AI, an amazing array of resources, and create some learning that is fun. And you do it intergenerationally, so we're testing as we go that pedagogy works, it's stimulating, it's current, it's relevant, maybe it's ahead of its time. And we're going to create experiential learning, not desk-based, screen-based learning, but experiential learning. And another joy for me looking at the website of Create yesterday was just seeing young people outside, activated by interactive learning exercises, moving their bodies and working in an educational way that seemed, much more liberating and relevant to how we develop ourselves and life skills. So I'm going to click into just an approach. This was a recent part of our work, positive relationships. This came out of, frankly, the Andrew Tate phenomenon, and schools struggling with toxic relationships in their schools. And we convened a community, thought leaders, schools that were interested. Quaker schools became and are still very keen on working with this methodology. We agreed our ways of working, created a group, scoped out the learning, and then went into the curation and co-creation exercise so that we created a suite of lessons that responded to needs, intergenerational all the way through. And then there they go onto the platform. Job done. I hope that doesn't sound trite, but a very simple exercise. But it was quite time intensive and expensive. And this is where AI has made the difference recently, and that's why I'm quite excited about introducing the benefit of AI. I'm just going to do a check that everybody's with me and the pace is right and that I'm not rushing through slides or written pieces such that it's difficult for you to follow. Can I just get a kind of nod that my pace is good? Great. Okay. Oh, I've only got Aisha bottom right, but thumbs up. I love that one. Thank you, Aisha. I would expect a thumbs up from Michael, Anna, and Robin, but thank you. Okay, so community-based curriculum development looks like this. Learn a topic, what are we learning? Why are we learning it? Where are we going to get the stuff from? Then we go selecting the best source material. Then we get into creation, and this is guided by expert curriculum designers. It will be tailored to the place and the frameworks and constraints that any educational system may have, all the way through to timetabling. And as it's open source, if stuff goes in under the radar in a school and is used and trialed and works great, then we will have a result. So the modality is, how are we going to deliver this learning? What, why, and when? Is it solo, for example? Is it in the community? Is it in our classroom setting? And so forth. So we're selecting the methodology of the delivery of the learning, as well as the content, and putting stuff together simple lessons, half-hour lessons. Now, what we've learned is that if we can get a great group together and do some consultation and just really look for the framing, the learning design, and then entrust one well-informed curriculum designer who uses AI in a really judicious, informed way, which is basically curation, what it's brilliant at. We all know what's called AI slop is the word. If you haven't heard that term, we know the risks of AI, but if it's deployed well, then just getting the scope brief from an intergenerational group on a topic or a life skill and a suite of lessons, that person can then go and very efficiently run an exercise that synthesizes tons of material and brings it together for them to operate their professional capability all the way through to, frankly, populating everything from support notes for the teacher, lesson slides, videos, and so forth. It's incredible what the tools can now enable a curriculum designer to do. And boy, were they expensive, curriculum designers, and time intensive. So that has radically changed. And a lot of our learning in this has actually come from a member of our team who now works for an organization called Apolitical, based out of London, but international, Berlin and Washington offices. And they train civil servants worldwide, and they operate this methodology. They get people together, they address a topic, could be deforestation and how that can be addressed or has been addressed, and they create a suite of learning resources that can be transferred to other civil servants in other nations. So they're at the very cutting edge of curation and creation of materials in adult learning. And so we can see the effect of how AI can be a force for good. So on the bottom right bit of copy here in the slide, we are super conscious of the limitations and the dangers of AI, but where it can be applied for good is certainly in this setting to democratize access to life skills learning by becoming very efficient and cost effective at developing life skills and altering them over time so they stay current, stay localized, stay relevant. That's the exciting bit. It's amazing to see what's happening. And also, because of the way AI can help one synthesize, this is all human governed, by the way, but the AI can support in the synthesis of divergent and convergent elements of design. You can do the good work of aligning. I remember Michael in our meeting a few months ago talking about the challenge for a curriculum like this being the systems that you guys have to operate within and teachers have to operate within. So our belief is that you can build in observance of frameworks, again, through that AI human interaction as you develop resources. You can train the tech. So all of the resources we've created have been mapped onto frameworks, and we're familiar with doing that in terms of PSHE here in the UK, but CASTLE and so forth, other NSGG frameworks. The people are very keen to map onto lessons and learning. So coming on to andragogy and pedagogy, I asked Anna and Robin about the audience, and pedagogy and andragogy. My understanding is that is where you have a main interest. So I'm going to very much accept challenge if I'm preaching to the converted here. But in my world of adult learning and in life skills learning, if you think of what I've described in terms of experiential lessons away from the screen, if you want to learn social skills, you won't do it on your own and you won't do it with an avatar. You'll do it in a social context, and you'll practice things. And whatever we designed for adult learning, if we were doing training work and coaching to some degree in adult learning for intact teams, which are teams who work together, or groups that have come just to develop their skills and awareness in corporate life, then we would put them into exercises where they would go through this learning ladder, which is not knowing what they didn't know, doing an exercise, realizing they didn't know it and they couldn't do it. That could be a team failing, and that's conscious incompetence. They become aware of their incompetence as a group given that objective. They didn't know they were incompetent. You put them into a situation, they fail and they learn, or they succeed and they learn. Over time, they develop conscious competence because they build in practices, awareness, and capabilities that give them a competence in that exercise. And you repeat it, and they become unconsciously competent. In the end, it's like driving a car. You get in, you drive it. You don't know why you're good at driving. You've become good at driving. This plays into one of the favored models for leadership and management in adult organizational life, that is called situational leadership. And whenever a CEO, I coached a few CEOs by the end of my time in coaching, and by the end of it, those CEOs go to a new situation. They are at the beginning of that ladder. So everybody is always learning depending on the situation they're in. So that is experiential learning, if you like, codified. So we are taking groups of people, young people in this instance, if one applies andragogy, into that experiential, that ladder of learning. And I don't know whether Robin, Michael, or Thomas, or Robin was at the Paris event I went to, but you may recall that one of the heavy hitters from the OECD in the final day cited andragogy and its relevance to young people learning. She is the first person I'd heard say, we must address the lack of andragogical work in and that was about creativity, that 3-day event. So it was the first person I'd heard talk about it, and it was music to my ears. And this is my way of just briefly taking you through the journey that a young person therefore would follow if life skills learning can be built in lightly but systematically into a curriculum. Unconsciously aware, consciously non-aware, consciously aware, unconsciously non-aware. Beginner's mind is, I come to everything fresh, knowing that I'm about learning. I'm not about knowing. I know I'm not a knower, I'm a learner. So in life skills, that's called open-mindedness, beginner's mind, if you want to borrow from Buddhism. And we see that as, if you like, the backdrop to how we would love young people to evolve as learners. And in an age, in the central line there, from an age perspective, obviously you're just equipping young people with literacy around topics to begin with. They're observing and getting informed at the right developmental age or developmental capability. They start to practice, they adopt and trial, whether it's the application of creative skills, values, whatever it might be, becoming a habit. They then believe in it. They say, this identifies with me, I can do this. They embody it. And then ultimately, these people can become advocates for that in their lives and for others. So, and into the community they go, or peer-to-peer learning means they advocate to younger people about what a life skill can bring to them, their place, and the planet, which is why it's underpinned with I, we, and all of this there. So call it idealized, if you like. We know that it is a little idealized, but it's I hope a worthy aspiration for educating young people in life skills. So the lessons themselves need to be this. I'm just checking on time. Anna, where are we? So we're 45 minutes in. I've got another half hour, yeah?
Well, you've got maybe 15 minutes for presenting and then 15 for Q&A.
Great. I think that's going to be manageable. Thank you. So yeah, so we're on the practical level of the what. Let's say this is a return to the what. Just to remind you, easy to access and facilitate. We think that's essential to make this adoptable, and social justice requires it to be easy to get in any setting, learning setting internationally. It's got to be developing the stuff that matters, and it's got to be stimulating pedagogically and andragogically as well. And just to remind you, this is what a group looks like. The chap in the center there with the glasses, he is from the Quaker School movement in the UK. There's me above him, international audience of young people. In here is a guy called Mike Nicholson, who runs an organization in the UK called Progressive Masculinity. He's on the radio all the time because he is addressing toxic masculinity head on in schools. And he gave his IP and his time for nothing into this lesson creation sessions. It was a series of sessions because he wants it out in the world. So that is an example of collaborative work that we do. So if we can pull those experts you may have imagined into a topic area, mostly they want to give freely of their time and their IP, their thoughts, their knowledge, to offer lessons to young people. Here are the lessons, what they create and what we create. Intergenerational collaboration, as I say, they look simple. You'll see a rhythm here: check-in, warm-up, main task, reflection. So very rhythmic, simple lessons. And a couple of quotes. I don't know whether, I know, Robin, you know Anne Bamford, don't know whether everybody else does, but she kindly called us the Airbnb of curriculum design, having been in London designing curricula for years. We were sort of that step above. She was collecting and sharing resources. This is obviously another level in terms of what we're aiming to deliver in terms of coherence and shape to a curriculum. And then the specialist in the US in Creative Commons sees this as a pioneering infrastructure. So we know what we're up against. We are pushing boundaries in terms of what we're hoping to achieve here in terms of collaboration and infrastructure in the Creative Commons. And we're just about to go out with a newly costed approach to funders and partners, potential partners from the education sector, corporate, because we think we've chopped the cost of development from about £1 million to £200,000, which I think I mentioned earlier. So it has been off-putting for people, I think, that we have been a very small charity with a very big idea, and they weren't prepared to take the risk. I think we're de-risking this as a way forward. And this is the village to raise the child. So when I come to a meeting like this, I ponder, well, in this room represented by you as people and as your organization, which part of the village are you coming from? And you would sit in a number of those, I would say, or 2 or 3 of them. But what our aim is to have that village around supporting the child. So I think I'm coming up to a slide that will ponder how the Create Centre could be part of an ecosystem of workers creating this future. And I'm going to pause now and just break into a question that relates to Create Centre and creativity, because an example of what happened with our Voices of Tomorrow project that I'm going to show you now is the youth circle, left to their own devices, created an amazing project to put the word out about who we are and what we're doing. And it came from one of our youth circle members in Afghanistan who put a picture online, a painting she'd done online, and it got a lot of traction and it attracted a lot of following. So they said, well, we would love to make it available to young people that they can put any artistic expression into the world. And we created a project to invite people from multiple countries to submit artworks, and it became funded gratifyingly by the BIC corporate foundation, and we ultimately were able to create this project where young people submit artworks. So you can picture where these are generated. We used I think it was a UNESCO lesson on visualizing your future and then pulling together something that expressed your future or our collective future. And these lessons were run all the way around the world. The reason I'm friendly with the Philippines at the moment is they went mad for it and created a huge number of school groups and informal groups to generate artworks. And we were able to collate them and build this platform. We were supported by Tech to the Rescue, who connected us with a charity, a company in India who built the capability of this platform, so that we can show all of these works as they are submitted, and they are uploaded by the people creating the artworks from the setting where they were created. And the topic of this exhibition was our shared future. So it's called the Voices of Tomorrow Project. We are about amplifying youth voice and being authentic in intergenerational working and placing young people at the center of our work. And this is the result. Multiple ages, multiple standards of work, you might say. And I'm showing you paintings here, but obviously there were submissions that were musical, sculptured, poetic. They were included in the show. And I wanted to show it to you just by way of illustration of what we have created in addition to curriculum work. And here is a 3D gallery available. So certain works of art were selected. I think 50 were selected to place in the 3D gallery, all around the theme, so people could go in and kids' schools, their teachers could see their works of art featured in the gallery. So I'm going to be inviting you to ponder where your connections, connections people you may know could be involved in the future of our work, and this is, potentially an entry point. And this is pretty sophisticated stuff in terms of the 3D gallery here. And so we're excited, and we're, again, the youth circle are looking for funding for the next project, which could be potentially on peace, we're thinking, is the next project. The ambition for that is to have every country on earth represented in that project. Okay, so I think I'm at time. I'm going to come back in and just put it to you as to, if a couple of questions really, if there was the opportunity based on some funding for the Create Centre or people within the Create Centre to be involved in a curation and creation of resources, would that potentially be interesting in a perfect world? I know the limitations, we're not holding the Create Centre to it, but would it be appealing to be involved in this kind of innovative curriculum design, supported by AI, guided by people who can apply that AI involvement appropriately, judiciously?
I wonder whether, sorry, Peter, to interrupt.
Yeah.
I wonder whether, because there's lots of people who are kind of online just to hear about this for the first time from our broader membership, whether it might be this might be the place for some questions, and maybe we can take that other suggestion you made or other question you made offline and then discuss that a bit further down the track. But
Sure.
I mean, I've got a question to kick off, which is, how do you see the relationship between pedagogy and andragogy? Because there's a live debate around whether andragogy is actually just pedagogy. And I'm just interested to understand the relationship you see between the two kind of areas.
Yeah. Yeah. So happily, I've had. Are you able to hear me? Because it's telling me the
No, you good.
internet connection.
No, you good.
Okay, you broke up a bit there, Michael, but I got the gist. So happily, I had the educationalists involved in development of the lessons, the scaffolding, and so forth, look into this in depth at the time that we created the proof of concept. They're not in the room. So I can give you my personal view and what I heard from them, but I am not an expert or a specialist in this field. But it could be as simple as, guide from the side as not sage on the stage, but essentially that coachability, the coachability of a learning exercise at a developmentally appropriate time. Because my understanding is there's plenty of written material about how didactic teaching suits the learner throughout education to a certain developmental age. At some point, blending andragogy will simply be about emphasizing in life skills terms more experiential learning, letting something happen, getting out of the way, and debriefing, asking coaching questions. How did it go? How could it have gone better? And in my world, when I've done this with young people to some degree, I've tested this myself, but it's only anecdotal. Then the KISS framework works, which is what do we keep? What do we improve? What do we start? What do we stop? That's in a group exercise. It's a very simple review mechanism, and the peer-to-peer learning can come, peer-to-peer education can come in at that point, because the review is typically done by the group about how they performed in an exercise. So it's an example of where self-governance in terms of how have we learned, what have we learned, how does it feel, what is our feedback to each other about the learning experience, is andragogical. It's about, it maps onto how adults learn. How do we go through the Kolb's learning cycle? Action, reflection, conclusion, plan. That's Kolb. And if you just, each of our lessons has the Kolb learning cycle at the end of it. What did we do when we talked about kindness? What did we think about it? What are the conclusions about how it felt to write a note to my friend about my appreciation for them? What would we do? Will we do, would I do this again? Those principles may be built into some pedagogy, but I see them as essentially andragogical, Michael. And so I think it's about, in the curation of resources, we always curate from bona fide methodologies and examples of lesson content that have already been tested. So that's one of the qualifications of, are we going to use a piece of work? So typically they will be founded and justified and researched and backed up, or universally they have been so far. And in that, we're assessing what's the best way to learn this topic, subject, or life skill. So I can only answer by saying that it's a judgment when one creates lessons, but that some groups like yours will probably, given what I think you do in applied learning and teaching, have plenty of andragogical learning activity and skill and capability, probably in comparison to, let's say, the more formal academic didactic, knowledge impartation. I don't know whether that's accurate enough, Michael. I'd love you to push back and say, well, that's, psychology.
Oh, no, not necessarily that. I suppose, there's a range of views, I think is fair to say. One of the things I would say, though, is that, and certainly in the work we've done with schools, is to think about the elements of pedagogy, like experiential learning, like direct instruction, like which we call motivated instruction. We've got we see 9 elements of pedagogy. And I think it's the extent to which you curate those depending on the developmental level of the child. So in early childhood, it's completely appropriate to have experiential learning, and it's completely appropriate to do that in adult learning as well, because I suppose from my perspective, learning is learning, and it's just how you curate the learning in different perspective, in different developmental kind of stages, which makes it effective. Um, and so, I mean, that's not to say that adults don't have different needs in learning. It's just to say it's a curation problem rather than you can't do this kind of learning with early childhood and you can't do this kind of learning with adults. There's obviously different needs and different capabilities, but I think we do ourselves a disservice if we kind of shut off learning opportunities or elements of pedagogy to younger learners because we think they're only so for instance problem-based learning or whatever.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a brilliant case in point. Problem, project-based games. I'm talking physical, not gamification. I'm talking physical games.
Yeah.
Anna said sometimes you get guests coming on and getting exercises done in the group. If I showed you group juggling, where you would get into a group and juggle balls, I'd feed more balls in, you'd drop them. I'd apply rules that you've got to say the name of the person you're passing to and constraints. You could do that game over and over and over again to get better and better and better at it. It's a lot of fun. I've seen any age group do it. It's a brilliant learning exercise for marginal gains, for listening, hearing, and so forth, and reviewing and improving. I completely agree with you about the way that andragogy pedagogy can apply, and in terms of the practical approach to that, when we convene a group now for our next phase, it will be a listening exercise, and then those who would then curate the material, assess its relevance given the learning objective, that would be not only someone who is good at curation curriculum design, but it will contain the educator who would govern decisions about what modality, what method, how andragogical, how pedagogical, how the blend works. So those two people are equipped with a way of approaching and then trialing so that it can be tested. So governing quality would include those things you mentioned.
Thanks, Peter. Just wondering if there's other questions. Aidan, you've had a couple of comments in the chat. I don't know whether you wanted to ask a question out of those or make a comment. Aisha, Robin, Anna.
I think maybe Aitan can't. They mentioned earlier that they couldn't tune in with the video. So, Michael, if you wouldn't mind reading out the comment and seeing if Peter has a reflection on that, that could be helpful.
So, is it true that andragogy is more and more about addressing deficits in adult capacities than their previous, largely 20th century pedagogical experiences, as younger people had not met? Peter, you there? Seem to have frozen.
Got it. Again, let's see. Yep, you froze too. Are we back together?
Yeah,
we're back. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I lost you, but happily I've got the chat and I've read it. Eaton says, sorry, wrangling the kids at the same time. It's beautiful, Eaton. I relate. Mine are older now, but look, I think when I look at what the PSHE curriculum does here in the UK, I'll say, unfortunately, it's about addressing challenges and difficulties. Don't do this. Don't join a gang. Don't self-harm. It's remedial work. Often, the way that people see life skills learning is to help schools be safer places. So it sort of plays into that question about deficits. Certainly, when it comes to my work, 15 years working with groups, I found certain countries would provide people into those groups or those intact teams. And I find these people very well informed about how to operate in a team and leadership principles. They'd been educated. that didn't apply generally in the educational system I came out of. So I think the point is correct, but the mission for us is to have positive ambition about how young people can flourish, and their awareness building can provide them with choices, with capabilities, with a love of learning that will come from great schools already. But if our work can support, augment, and build that, so much the better. And I think access to certain concepts for young people can open their minds hugely about how they learn. For example, we looked at that earlier. And just a values dialogue or what is being creative? Let's define creativity. How can we apply it to daily life? And then how can we live it? And this, I guess, is central to the Create Centre's work. So I would say you may be right, Aiton, that in my work at adult stage, it is often about addressing gaps and deficits. But are you implying that the pedagogy that they've experienced has actually limited them? And I would say, yes, I would agree it does at the moment. Because I just don't find it creative enough, inventive enough, inclusive enough. We all know about the SEN crisis, or you might not know, in the UK. So the inclusivity, the diversity of methodology applied in learning nowadays just is poor. And I think you guys are going a long way probably to addressing that and to challenging it and to innovate around it. So I would probably agree, but I wouldn't say it's primary or provable that you're always responding to previous pedagogical experience. Maybe true.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's what you're saying about deficits in the UK experience, and I can only go on reports that have come out of the UK, but certainly Robin Alexander's work points to those deficits in a curriculum that's been narrowed in some ways to the exclusion of the arts, which has meant that those kinds of core skills that are taught by the arts haven't been present. But to my mind, that's not a pedagogy problem. Well, it is a pedagogy problem, but it is mostly a curriculum problem that doesn't allow for the kind of expansive pedagogies that we might expect when those kind of arts experiences are removed from kids. Robin, did you want to make a comment or ask a question?
Well, I guess I would also say that in Australia, despite, the acknowledgement of the importance of critical thinking and creativity and etc., lots of us are very worried about, a fairly narrow and reductive syllabus. It's called a curriculum, but it's not really a curriculum. It's they're syllabus documents. And, I think the whole concept of working in an intergenerational way and in an interdisciplinary way to look at life skills is really important. But while I think we have the rhetoric, I'm wondering in terms of what's actually happening in some states, at least in Australia, whether it's really happening as we would like it to happen. Michael, that would be my addition to what you've talked about here.
Okay. I mean, I think the fascinating thing about this is it opens up a discussion, which I think is long overdue and it's certainly true in the work that we do in Australia and the work that you're doing, Peter, which is how do we start to think about what students actually need rather than what the curriculum is or what the school system is currently giving them. And I think the resistance you're facing and the resistance we face in lots of places comes down to an inertia. And, we'll keep doing what we've always done because we've always done it. And systems are as I said to you earlier, I think systems are very difficult to change, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to. And I think the work you're doing and other work around the world is a really critical part of that, opening up, if nothing else, a discussion that can then lead to action from schools that want to engage in those ways. So thank you so much for that. Did you want to say anything before we close off this evening?
Yeah, just that. Well, when we did our Voices of Tomorrow project, we looked at a project called Turn It Around out of Arizona State University, and they got artworks, and they got the young people to do artworks, and they took them to Antonio Guterres, UN. They had their artworks, informing policymakers. Bye, Robin. Thanks for coming. See you. And then they started creating lessons on the back of they didn't intend to create learning exercises, but they did. So I just thinking from the Create Centre's point of view, we see art and creativity as a stimulus for all sorts and a support for all sorts of debate, values discussion, social skills, art, and everything that it as young people has a place at the heart of any learning, because it's fun, it's interesting, it takes you out of your body or into your body, whichever you may look at that. So that's one thing, and no, other than that, I hope what I've done is share what I think are the market forces around making systems change, or helping systems to change. And it's a waiting game, and there's, as you say, Michael, plenty of people hoping the timing is coming, and that the people are waking up to the opportunity that exists to embrace a new way of educating young people. And there's plenty of movements and groups, and it's when they coalesce, which is why reaching out in this kind of forum is something I'm really willing to do. We never know where the ripples may go, is how I would end this. So that's the faith that keeps us going, and we live and learn. And thank you for the time. Thank you for having me. And I want a bonus point for being finished 2 minutes before time.
Yeah, well done. So thank you, Peter. That was really thought-provoking. And of course, the discussions we can have around connecting further, we can have down the track and pursue that a bit further. But thanks everyone who came this evening. Thanks everyone who watched this on YouTube. All the best until we meet again. Details of the next webinar will be in the newsletter, and if you're a member, you can see it there. But thanks very much, Peter.
Thank you, patrons. Thanks for having us.